This episode is brought to you by Bubs Naturals. Bubs Naturals is a tribute to former Navy SEAL Glen "Bub" Doherty, a national hero who laid down his life saving Americans in Benghazi, Libya. Glen was a best friend to hundreds, people of all walks of life, from ski bums to outdoor enthusiasts, hippies, SEALs, fitness fanatics, and anyone and everyone in between. Glen's call sign in the Navy was Bub. He stood for self-improvement and was always looking to help others, and that same DNA is woven into the Bubs brand. They donate 10% of all of their profits to charity in Glen's honor, starting with the Glen Doherty Memorial Foundation. Now, we were lucky enough to have Bubs come in as a partner at our Power Monkey camp, and they were an absolute hit with all the coaches, campers, and staff. We were lucky enough to have a variety of their products to test out, from their collagen protein to their brew coffee, as well as their Hydrate or Die electrolytes. Now, I was an absolute fan of the Hydrate or Die. We are on our feet at camp, constantly teaching, training, learning, playing for an entire week, and I needed something to be able to get me through those days, and the Hydrate or Die was what allowed me to do so, all the way to that last pickleball game at the end of each night. And if you would like to try out some of their product, please be sure to head over to bubsnaturals.com and use the code POWERMONKEY, all one word, all caps, for 20% off. Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world of fitness about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host this week being Mike Service and Jordan Samuel, and we have the pleasure of interviewing Sean Lake. Sean has had quite a career, starting with his time as a professional snowboarder, which led him to a career in sports marketing. He was a team manager for Burton Snowboards, working with guys like Shaun White, before moving on to DC Sports, where he was their global director of sports marketing for a number of years. He is also the co-founder of Bubs Naturals, which is actually how we met Sean and his team. We've been lucky enough to have Bubs on as a sponsor of camp for a little while now, and we absolutely love their products. We discuss how the company was founded and the legend of Glen Bubs Doherty, Sean's best friend, Navy SEAL, and American hero who lost his life saving Americans in Benghazi, Libya in 2012. The Bubs brand is about bringing highest quality products with the ethos that centers around the passionate and adventure-seeking life that Glen lived. Sean has also had a long history with CrossFit, having started with Glen years ago in Southern California. He has had a hand in some really impactful moments within the CrossFit space, including helping to bring the CrossFit Games to Carson, California for the first time back in 2010. It was a pleasure speaking with Sean about his journey navigating fitness and also being an entrepreneur and dad. We hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as we did.
You look super cool. You look like John
we're
Travolta.
trying to hit like a more diverse market, and we think if I look a little more like rough and rugged, as they would say, badass, we might pull some people in.
I'm gonna say Philip Morris.
Initial
That's
thoughts.
a huge sponsor.
They used to sponsor the Olympic team back in the day.
Did
You know
they
that?
really?
But we used to have,
These are orange flavored Ricola. I was just telling the guys that I got them at the airport, and they're so good. I'm like addicted
Any
to them.
street cred you had, Mike, just went out the window.
Yeah, it's so wrong.
You tell me you get a pack of Camel Unfiltered or some Marlboro Reds in there, it'd be a different story. But
Yeah.
Instead I'm getting the Ricolas.
All right.
yeah.
I do have some Winston Churchill Robusto cigars over there, just to even out this timid version that I had of my
Any
treats.
chance to talk about your cigars, Mike? I love it. You know that at the training center back in the day, Budweiser was a full-on sponsor. You'd be in the gym and there were like huge alcohol branding everywhere at the OTC. I was like, yeah, that's and now you're not even allowed to have alcohol anywhere on campus. That's like,
I mean,
things change.
Things change. Like the big
Absolutely.
sponsor too.
John, good to see you again.
Good. It's been a while. It's been a while.
Almost exactly 24 hours.
Almost to the minute.
I've heard great
So
things,
I don't know
Sean.
if you ever met Mike and or Jordan, but Mike is normally my co-host. Jordan jumps in, gives his very important 2 cents often, but he's more of our tech guy and makes sure that everything runs smoothly.
Got it. Well, if every once in a while he lobs something in, I'm just going to respond every single time by, remember when Reebok was cool?
He's another masshole for you, so...
Yeah, I live like 20 minutes from where you lived. I live in Nashua.
Oh, no kidding. There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. Just up the street.
Yeah, and Reebok used to be cool. That's true. But
yeah. I had a great stint with them, which we might talk about my consulting years when I used to work around CrossFit. But yeah, I used to go down to the Canton campus, and it was CrossFit everything. I remember being like, "Oh yeah, you guys have like taken the old AI shoe section, the old Iverson basketball court, and you're doing wind sprints on it now, and no one's playing hoops anymore because it's not cool." But hey, you go outside, and the whole Spartan race course is out in that entire yard area.
What years were you there?
I worked with them 2013 through 15. So it was like 2.5 years on and off of crisscrossing with some consulting work. They were hell bent on expanding into the action sports space and kind of getting into training over there. So I was brought in to consult with them and basically seed a bunch of product. Like, it was like Bodie Miller from the US ski team, who's like a notorious trainer. He used to use those Vibram 5-finger creepy toe shoes.
I think Mike's got a pair of those.
I do not. I foot covered. I like Vivo Barefoot.
But I think during those years, that was like right around when
I grew up
Jordan
in Ohio.
and I met. And during the training grounds days, were you around during the training grounds?
Yep.
At Reebok?
Yep.
And
we probably crossed paths a couple times then.
Yeah, I worked around a group called Barbells for Boobs, Ziona Hansen and her crew. And I was this sort of outsider that just helped them navigate some of their partnerships and some of their bigger relationships, Reebok being one of the biggest ones. And so I'd walk into Reebok in like 2011, and I'd be with the whole Boobs crew, and they were doing signature pink shoes of the Nano 2, whatever year that was, like 2012, 2013, something like that. And they were enamored with the whole Boobs authenticity and how well they activated at that kind of CrossFit gym level while it was going through this like giant growth spurt. But I was right in there with that. And then they're kind of like, "Where do you come from?" And I'm like, "I used to snowboard for a living. And I just got done working for 6 years at DC Shoes, surf, snow, motocross, BMX, all the fun sports." And they were like, "And you do CrossFit?" I'm like, "Oh yeah. Yeah. CrossFit makes sure that I can still paddle out and surf well and, go hike up a mountain if I want to. I love CrossFit." And they were like, "Oh, well, tell me more about these sports." And I would do these meetings with, a bunch of their leads. And I'd be like, "Well, look there's, 18 million active, skateboarders in the world. There's all these people surfing as an aspirational sport." I said, "And here's the training regimens around them." And they were just like, "Oh yeah, we want to learn more about that." So they hired me on. I worked under the running department because they didn't know where else to put me. And it was when JJ Watt was getting like a signature shoe on Reebok, as like their way to counterbalance everything they were doing in CrossFit over here. And for about a year, I was just playing Santa Claus. I was just laying shoes out to everyone who wanted them. And then getting the feedback loop and kind of presenting it back to them. And they just wanted intel. They just wanted information. So it was a really easy job to have. In terms of just sharing a culture that I came from with a bunch of guys that didn't come from it. They were like, "Yeah, we're curious." But, and then ultimately, right when they were ready to hand me a budget to do like sponsored activations, athlete activations, someone got smitten with a combination of, Spartan had already gone down. It was Les Mills. Mm-hmm. And then I want to say it was something to do with MMA, but they hadn't quite launched it yet because it was like 2015 or something. But it was right when they were getting ready to go into MMA. So basically, MMA got all the budget that they had allocated for me and Les Mills. And I'm like, well, that is disappointing.
Well, you coming from the snowboarding background, we can kind of work backwards a little bit. But
are we recording, by the way?
We are, yeah.
Oh, sweet. All right, here we go. I don't even have to worry about an intro or anything.
We're going to do intro. We do intros separately. So we'll do that. We'll just jump in. We used to do intros like a little more formally, and then we missed out on a lot of good content that always happened before we hit record. So we're like, let's just start recording, and then we can edit if needed. So cool. We'll do the intro separately. But this idea of you having been a snowboarder, we can dive a little into that. But I'm kind of interested in the intersection between you being a snowboarder, then finding CrossFit and saying, this is going to help me in my sport. Can you talk a little bit about like finding CrossFit and then it being a tool to help you say, hey, I can surf and snowboard, and this can be something not only for myself, but also for the other athletes in these sports to make them better at what they do?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most folks that go through a career arc, look at whether you're a professional athlete or just someone who does something at a fair level. Like I snowboarded, not yes, I snowboarded professionally in my 20s. I was paid to ride a snowboard. I got to travel all over the world. I wasn't paid much. I mean, on the tiers of professional snowboarding, I was like a B, maybe a B minus even. But it paid for college. I got to travel the world and it was awesome. But like we didn't train. Like snowboarding in the 90s was about cojones and adventure and doing things for the first time. It was how we viewed the mountain. It was like this landscape to go and just explore and see what you could do. And then, invent some new way of getting down the mountain. Or for a lot of guys, it was new tricks. I kind of fell into the big mountain riding side of things, and the terrain that I rode was more about that than like building jumps and doing freestyle. And I just kind of fell into like my sense of adventure was peaked when it was like, here's a really steep run with a giant cliff somewhere in it, and you have to navigate your way down. And there's a camera over there that's going to take a picture of you. And I was like, okay, let's go figure this out. Everything I learned about training, I learned from my best buddy. So I grew up in a little town in Massachusetts, and my best buddy that I had joined on his adventure and our adventure to go to the mountains and drop out of college to become pro skier, pro snowboarder. Like he wanted to be a skier. I wanted to be a snowboarder. It was this guy, Glen Doherty, who we'll talk about, more probably later on. But Glen was the jock. Like he was the one who brought training into the mix. So every once in a while we'd lace up and go for a run. It was like the hardest thing in the world. Or like he had these like little interval training exercises called Bears and Chiefs that he would do, which was basically like some OG US rowing team, high intensity training that he picked off from one of his college buddies. One of our mutual buddies that had gone off to college. And that was training. And then when he left, Glenn left, joined the Navy, became a Navy SEAL. He took off over there. When he left, like I stopped training. I didn't have anyone to push me and nudge me. And, I was 26 to 30 years old. And somewhere around 33, I was a little doughy. I was traveling. I'd been on the desk circuit. I was done snowboarding. I was, I saw that I had this little pudge layer and I was like, oh, I don't like that. It was a full vanity play. I was like, what? That sucks. And then I was like, well, I what should I do about that? And it was Glenn, coming home from a deployment, and he introduced me to running and cycling, like made me buy my first road bike. And this is now, a couple of years later. And then I don't know, I think I was like 37 or so. And he's like, came home from a deployment. He was in Iraq and he came back and he was just like lit up like a Christmas tree. He's like, I got this new program. Oh yeah, man. It is going to change everything. It's called CrossFit. And I'm like, cross who? And, I'm like, what do you do? And he's like, well, and we both had a membership at the local Encinitas YMCA. So we go to the YMCA and it's like full Globo gym. And he's like, well, we're going to learn how to do this thing called a kipping pull-up. And I'm just on this bar flopping around like I'm having an epileptic seizure. I could barely do one pull-up. But that was the journey. It started there. And he had this website on his BlackBerry that he would pull up and be like, now we're going to go do deadlifts. And they didn't have rubber plates. They had metal plates. And you're just clanging away in there and figuring it out. And we just were so disruptive. But that was my introduction to this thing called CrossFit and this measurable way of gaining your first steps in fitness. And I was hooked from the start. It was competitive. My best friend was better at it than I was, and I wanted to be better at it than him. And he was a Navy SEAL, so he was just kicking my ass every day, but it was really motivating. And the fire was, Dave, kind of getting back to it, was like, not only was it vanity based, hey, I didn't want to have a pudge layer. I wanted to surf and snowboard and do the sports that I love doing. And I knew that this was going to help me do them better. And it was like, I was motivated to beat my best friend, look good naked, and do the sports I love doing. I mean, it was all in a blender. And, you're in your 30s and you're like, hey, that's either when it's make it or break it time. Like, do you want to be a slug, or you want to have good energy and get after it? And I chose have good energy and get after it.
And like right around that time, it seems like you're still very much in like the sports world with your regular job, but the training started to take hold a little bit more. Were you training with SEAL Fit at that time, or was that a little bit later down the road?
So it's funny. this is in '07. We started working out at the local YMCA, but really early in 2008, Glen realized that there was a gym in Encinitas, in our hometown, owned by a Navy SEAL called SEAL Fit. And it was a gym called US CrossFit / SEAL Fit. And he's like, this gym's owned by a Navy SEAL. He's like, we got to go there. So we rolled down there one afternoon. And yeah, at the time, I was the director of sports marketing for DC Shoes. So I had a day job, and I would work out at 6 a.m. with Glen or 6 p.m. like after work, like, just find the window and team up whenever he wasn't on deployment, because he was living in Encinitas. So it was easy. We just got together and, would go work out. Well, we go into this gym and Glen just walks in the door, like just, proud chest. And he's like, hey, where's the Navy SEAL around here? And, Mark Devine, who's a very famous speaker, author, motivator, he rolls up and he's, they shake hands and they kind of do the secret SEAL thing. And Glen's like, you need me to work out here to validate your gym. Like, you need me here. And that was Glen. He had this like big, giant personality. And I'm off his shoulder. And I'm like, yeah, you need me here too, because I'm his bro. And the head coach at the gym was a guy named Rory McKernan. So here we are in sleepy Encinitas, and this chiseled, made for TV guy named Rory rolls up, and we just start working out at the gym. And I think I worked out there for like 8 or 9 months. No one ever asked me for a dime. And like, this is like the horrors of like the gym business model. Like, no one ever asked me to pay for a membership. So I'm like 9 months in, and, Rory's kind of like, hey man, like, you got a membership or anything here? And I'm like, no, do you need any snowboarding gear? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, what, you double extra large? He's like, yeah. I'm like, no problem. I'll bring you a box. I've just brought him like a couple $1,000 worth of snowboarding gear. He's like, cool, you got a membership. Maybe like a year into it, Mark Devine finally corners me. Now it's like 2009. I'm hooked, guys. I'm going to class 4 days a week, plus, weekend classes. I am all in. I'm showing up at business meetings after like doing my first Murph in, 2009 with just scab, bloodied pod from doing all the pull-ups. And, I'm all in on it, because it's just, I'm surfing better. I'm snowboarding better. I'm feeling good. Like it's the right channel of, that kind of early midlife section. Like, what, I'd rather do that than get buried in a bottle of scotch or something. So it felt right. And Mark grabs me like a year in. He's like, hey man, like, can you just like go get your level 1? Can you just please do that? Cause like, I mean, just coach, just do something around here. And when Mark asks you to do something, like, you do it, because he is inspirational. The guy is just a walking muscle, but he's also like, he walks the walk, he talks the talk. Like, he's the right guy to motivate you. And I was like, you know what? If you want me to coach a class here, I've never coached anything in my life. I'll figure that out. Sure. So I go to my level 1. There's one in San Diego. And it was really funny because this is how I met everyone in CrossFit. At that time, Rory had moved on and taken a job with CrossFit HQ, and he was on like the cert staff. And I go in, I get into this level 1 cert, and Dave Castro's teaching it. Rory McKernan's teaching it. A bunch of these legends in CrossFit are all teaching this level 1 cert. And, like all the people are there. Greg Glassman's just cruising around the joint, and like, I'm shaking hands with him. Hey, how's it going? What everyone figures out while we're there is that I'm the director of marketing for DC Shoes, and that I've been around the X Games for, 7 or 8 years, and I know all about these events. Well, what I didn't know is that they had an event called the CrossFit Games, and that was a kind of a big deal to them. I'd never heard of it. I was just there to get my level 1 because Mark told me to get it. Like, I knew nothing about CrossFit culturally, other than I loved the gym and I loved the people I was surrounded by. So I get my level 1, I go back and I start coaching, and I don't know, maybe like 6 months later, something like that, I get a call from Rory, and he's like, hey, would you be willing to go have lunch with Dave Castro? I'm like, yeah, I guess so. Sure. What does he need? You need some help? Yeah, sure. I'll help him out. Like, I love CrossFit. It's great. So I go have lunch with Dave Castro and Jimmy Letchford. Jimmy Letchford is their director of marketing, who's now like the president of GoRuck. and has become a dear, dear friend, and Dave, who's another friend of mine. And we go and have lunch. And I remember we went to a Mexican restaurant and they're eating tortilla chips. And I'm like, are you guys allowed to do that? Like, isn't that like a CrossFit diet or something? I'm giving them a hard time. And really the meat and potatoes of it was Dave talking about the CrossFit Games. He's like, I have this event. It's at my family's ranch in Aromas, California, and we're getting kicked out. We can't do it anymore. The fire department, there was too many people. We have all these health code things we got to adhere to. I need a new venue. I'm like, oh, I can help with that. So I hand him a whole bunch of different venues like Paula Casino in San Diego, a couple up north of LA. And then I hand him Home Depot Center, which is now called the StubHub Center. And I'm like, yeah, here's some people. Here's how you do it. And I walk away. About a month later, he's like, hey, so we really like this Home Depot Center. You think you could help us like meet some people that run that? I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. Like I call up my contact at the X Games, where a lot of the events were hosted, Summer X Games, a lot of the moto freestyle and BMX freestyle, stuff like that. I get them a contact for event sales and pass it over to Dave and Jimmy. And I say, all right, guys, good luck. Another couple of weeks goes by and they're like, hey man, so we think we're going to work with the Home Depot Center. Thanks so much. Do you think you could help us like navigate the contract, like how to actually do this? I had no idea that they didn't know about that event side and that it was new to them. Well, I'm like, yeah, sure. So I like review their operating budget, give them a couple suggestions. Here's how you get your insurance. Here's parking. Here's those other elements of event management. Nothing too heavy. They took off and ran with it. And then I get a phone call that summer and they're like, hey man, do you want to come up to Carson and come check out CrossFit Games? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. At this point, it's now the summer of 2010. And it's the first year of that as their event center. And I never forget, like I pull up front and center, I get to park, walk out, Jimmy meets me, grabs me, races me in through it, runs me right up onto some VIP suite roof, just in time for these jets to fly overhead and just go. And I'm just like, whoa.
It worked.
You guys are doing this right.
Yeah, you've been around. Yeah, man, you've seen it all when it comes to the early days and to where it is now. That's for sure. Do you miss the fact that it's not in Carson anymore after having put so much sweat equity into seeing that space turn out some of the best games ever?
Yeah, you know what I do? Those were magical years. I'm so glad I got up there. I mean, they would just give me passes to go up for the next several years while it was up there. They're just like, yeah, what do you need? Like, come on up. So it was really cool. Like I never worked for CrossFit. I never worked with CrossFit. I like those guys. I got along with Greg. I got along with Dave. I love Jimmy. Like it was a cool crew doing cool things for fitness. And they were so obsessed with culture that we'd have these great conversations because I came from action sports culture. I came from something that was very protective, very insular, very inclusive. And it was neat to be able to share that with those guys. And I loved the sport. I loved what it did for me and how you could kind of share that out with the world. I thought that was I think it was magical then. It's different now, but it's equally as magical if you apply the practices. So, I'm grateful for that time. I just kind of stumbled into it because, hey, I'm at a gym in Encinitas and, Rory McKernan's the coach. And then, Mark wanted me to get a level 1. And then I just kind of stumbled into these funny experiences, but super fun. And I love CrossFit for what it can do. I mean, really any fitness for what it can do for your life.
Now, we were talking recently about, you were mentioning doing Murph at one of your son's baseball games and things like that. And like other parents like watching him, like, what is this crazy person doing with a vest on and running around doing pull-ups? And, we're very close to Memorial Day and Murph being so synonymous with that weekend. I'm guessing that you'll be doing Murph Memorial Day, and you've been doing it for a while. Is that correct?
15 years of Murph. It's wild. I found the original photo of me and Glen doing Murph in 2009 at the Seal Fit gym. Just bananas. I mean, it's like, it's such classic memories. I'll never forget like drinking too much water the first year and barfing it up on the ground, like in the middle of the workout. But that was like cool. Today people would be like, oh my God. Yeah, man, 15 years of it. Some years you do it 2 or 3 times. It's just kind of built into what you do. It's a full suffer fast. I never get any faster or better at it. like I just live in the same little time slog every year. It's like the same amount.
Do you ever change it up, or do you do the same 1, 2, 3, or do you break it up Cindy style? Do you wear a vest? Do you not wear a vest? Do you ever try different iterations of it?
So it's funny outside. So I've never not worn a vest. Glen had an old flak jacket. So that was my original vest, was one of his old vests. It was like just mangled, but it was like, hey, this thing weighs a lot, put it on, do the workout. I went through the Kokoro Seal Fit experience where I did it with like a 35-pound sandbag on or something god awful. It was just miserable. And by comparison, everything since then has just felt better. So a 20-pound weight vest, I try and put it on several times a year. I'm a big fan of rucking, but yeah, no, I do it. I do it every year religiously. I do it 100, 200, 300. I'll do it 10, 20, 30. I'll do it 5, 10, 15, 15, 10, 5. Like, I think variety is a good spice. If I had one go-to, it's 5, 10, 15. I think the Cindy style it's a manageable workload that doesn't overtax any one muscle group. I mean, you're going to get taxed, but like 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, like you're just rotten as hell after that. So, but then again, now that we're talking about it, maybe this year I go back to that one and just get spicy. It's been a few years.
Yeah, that's a totally different workout. The Cindy style versus 1, 2, 3 is a totally different workout. A couple years ago, Jordan and I did. He just was like, "Hey, you want to do Murph 30 days in a row?" And I was like, "Yep, sure, yep." So Jordan and I took on that challenge, which was fun to document, and we played around with different iterations every day, different states, different countries. Jordan was at the games trying to do it. Jordan was like, "Would you ever do that again?"
Worst. It was like I was shooting. They were like 10, 12, 13-hour days, and I'd have to go back to the hotel. I'd go into the hotel bar, order food, run upstairs, do Murph in the gym at the hotel, run back downstairs, get my food, go back up, eat it, shower, go to bed, wake up, shoot the whole next day. It was like I really timed this poorly.
And then Murph it again. That is absolutely horrible. But yet no one around you is like giving you any grief for that.
Well, it was funny because normally if you're in a hotel gym doing that, people are looking at you like, what is going on? But this whole hotel was filled with CrossFitters. So they're like, oh, you're doing Murph? I'm like, yeah. Like there's just other CrossFitters in the gym there.
Hey, in the world of one-upping, I don't do this, but SealFit has sort of born this breed of folks that have just taken some of the mental schlag activities and really elevated them to the next level. And I definitely attribute Mark's coaching and kind of priming for challenging what you think you're capable of. And that's the whole idea of the Kokoro camp and the SealFit camp is, you start as one person and you leave as another person. And for 2.5 days, you're getting reshaped in terms of what you're capable of. I would argue, Jordan, that on day 25, like your motivation, your fire probably came from the fact that Dave's going to do it, and that mutual accountability.
I mean, I think we talked about that. Like, there's no way I would have bagged it at like the 20-day mark, just like, this is stupid. But I knew Dave was doing it.
Bingo.
Yeah,
but there's a magic in that accountability. And it's like, oh, you hear these cliche expressions, iron sharpens iron. Well, they're not really cliche, and they really do make sense. And iron does, in fact, sharpen iron. But that iron by itself doesn't get any sharper. You need another set of iron to help do that sharpening thing. And you had a partner for that. And that's one of the beauties, again, of CrossFit is that mutual accountability. I'm doing Murph for the 15th year. And yeah, I'm old as dirt, so that kind of makes sense. And I'm doing it with my buddies, my neighbor across the street. It doesn't go to a CrossFit gym, but this workout has transcended CrossFit. Like it's gone to a whole nother level. And I love that about it. And he's doing it. And he's like, oh, where do you want to do it? He's like, well, my brother's in town. Let's take him down to Mission Bay and we'll do it at the park down there. We'll bring our kids and make it more celebratory. So it's less about being on the clock, but we're going to put out. It's more about like, well, let's go and make this a thing. Cool. Normally I do it in the CrossFit gym, like my local CrossFit box, and they're doing a big celebration. And I'm like, well, cool. I'll stop by there afterwards and see the community. And again, accountability, like you want to do the work and get it done. So I absolutely love that. And back to the one-upping thing, one of the Kokoro graduates decided he was going to do Murph every day for a year.
I think I might have heard about this guy.
Roofing business. And his name escapes me right now. I know him on Instagram and Facebook, and I met him at the gym a handful of times. He kind of came in after I left. But I remember he did it. I'm like, rain or shine, this guy figured it out and did it. And then I just got word of another one of the Kokoro graduates, this guy named Cole Rogers. And Cole was way after my time there. He's coming to San Diego this fall, and he wants to do 24 hours of Murph and set a Guinness World Record doing it. I'm like, what? I mean, we're talking like he wants to do like 20 rounds in 24 hours, something just absolutely obscene. I can't even get my head around that.
That's intense. Yeah, there's always another level. No matter what you think is impressive, there's somebody else ready to do something just a little bit crazier.
Yeah, man, that to me is next level. But you can bet I'll be there to cheer him on. I'll do a round with him.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be huge. Everybody, he gets 24 people or 20 people. Each person does one round with him. That's going to be incredibly motivating, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I
probably won't want the 3 a.m. shift if I can avoid it.
I feel like for a 24-hour Murph, they're going to need some good electrolytes.
Yeah, you should help them out.
You know what? I know a guy. I know
Okay,
a guy.
good. I was going to ask you amongst your travels, if you've ever met anybody that, had some good electrolytes or had to hook up with any coffee or anything like that. But I don't want to butt in.
Remarkable segue to Bubs Naturals, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I want to get to Bubs Naturals, but the name Bubs, I mean, we're talking about training partners, and you mentioned Glen already in terms of him being so instrumental in you getting into fitness and getting strength conditioning. And then if you wouldn't mind, because I don't think everyone knows the story about Glen and Bubs and what happened in 2012 and kind of that portion of the story, because then I think it lends itself into some of the things we want to bring up.
Yeah. And thanks for asking. So it's funny because it's been such an integral part of my life that I just, oh yeah, Bub, oh yeah, Glen. And some folks look at me like, yeah, you're talking about some person that I don't know. So Glen was my best friend, really like a brother growing up. We met in, junior high, really got to know each other in high school, became just thick as thieves, best buddies. So when I moved to Utah to go ski bumming, I moved out there with Glen. Glen dropped out of being a ski bum after about 4 or 5 years and went on to become a Navy SEAL. He was that kind of intensity, that kind of personality. So literally you don't just drop out of being a ski bum and go become a Navy SEAL. I mean, this guy like toured with the Grateful Dead during the summer, like cruised around, worked as a river raft guide, painted houses. Like we had the most eclectic jobs in the off season. He literally one summer toured with the Grateful Dead, selling peanut butter sandwiches in the parking lot for tickets to shows and gas money to go to the next show. And that was his job, but did it for like 2.5 months. Awesome. And then he decides that he wants this next challenge in life. He's like, I'm not going to make it as a pro skier. If I haven't made it by 25, the dream's not going to happen. He was a hell of an athlete. I mean, again, he was the one who taught me about training. He's the one who got me geared up towards it and actually to pay attention to it. He meets a couple of Navy SEALs on a surf trip in Costa Rica when he's 24, comes back and he's like, man, they kind of told me I got what it takes. I want to see what I'm made of. What am I made of? So he turns 25. I drive him down to the Navy recruiter in Sandy, Utah. Next thing you know, he signs his paperwork. He's off to basic training. And a year later, I'm going to his Buds graduation. Here I am, like purple hair, shaggy pro snowboarder, rolling down a Coronado, like, oh, better tuck in my shirt. And Glen serves 10 years at SEAL Team 3. And like he's just locked and loaded, living in San Diego. I end up getting done snowboarding. I'm turning 30. I got my college degree. I wrapped it up. And it was time to get out of snowboarding. I was old. There was all these young bucks coming in that were just kicking ass. And I walked away from, any of the sponsorship stuff that I had. And I ended up getting a shoulder tap to move to San Diego as the team manager for Burton Snowboards. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I'm going to work with this young kid named Sean White, lives in Carlsbad, and I got to move down to Encinitas, so the next town over, and I'm going to work with him. So I became Sean's team manager, worked at Burton 02, 03, and that launched me into working with the X Games and working with Tony Hawk and DC Shoes. And all the while, my best friend is 30 minutes down the road in Coronado. Freaking awesome. When Glen got out of the Navy, we became roommates. He moved up to Encinitas. 2 divorced guys turning 40, running around SEAL Fit, having a blast. But Glen would deploy, and he was doing private security work for the Central Intelligence Agency. So Glen was a security agent, worked in the GRS branch for the CIA, and he did it for several years, and it was great money. But it was a bit of kryptonite. Like it was this kind of like just hitting pause on the next chapter in your life. So he'd go over their high danger situations, Beirut, Iraq, Mexico City, like you name it, he'd go all over the world. And then his last deployment was in September of 2012. He went to go provide security work for the CIA in Tripoli. It was right after we had reopened diplomatic relations after the fall of Gaddafi. And Glen was one of the Americans killed in the terror attacks in Benghazi, Libya. So some folks go, oh yeah, that movie, 13 Hours. That was Glen on the rooftop. Oh yeah, Hillary Clinton got in a whole bunch of trouble. There was like a congressional hearing for Benghazi. That was Glen killed on that rooftop. Glen went to the fight from Tripoli down to Benghazi, got up on that rooftop, gave it to the enemy before they got him. And he saved a bunch of American lives in the process. Like he got the plane from Tripoli down to Benghazi that then saved all the lives of everyone that was on the ground to get them out of that CIA annex. And so he laid down his life and other Americans lived. And that was Glen in a nutshell. So I was the executor of Glen's estate. I was his listed next of kin on his government paperwork. And Glen's legacy became my job. It became this way to channel all this grief and energy that I had and try and turn it into something positive. And there's a whole set of adventures around doing that. We started a foundation, the Glen Doherty Memorial Foundation. Have you guys ever heard of the Glen Hero Wad?
Mm-hmm. We were going to bring it up. Yeah. We were.
Oh,
yeah.
I've done it. Great work.
But that was Glen. Like Glen was this heroic personality. When Glen died, like Castro and Greg Glassman came to my house to do the celebration of life with us. Like they'd met Glen, but they just knew to honor someone from their community. And like, I mean, to this day, if I bump into Greg, we'll have these amazing conversations about conspiratorial politics and shit that went wrong and like, all that kind of stuff. He loves that stuff. And what I know is that a ton of mistakes were made that day. And, Glen did the right thing and he joined the fight. And I am honored to be in a position where I can celebrate the awesome things that he stood for. Like Glen was best friend to hundreds of people. Glen lit up rooms with his bullshit storytelling and half truths that would make everyone belly laugh. And then his sincerity to follow up and be able to just like give Michael a really hard time about his hairstyle and then ask how his mom's doing and genuinely remember important details about his life. And then flip over to Dave and like give you some Jersey Shore comments, but then also be like just absolutely fascinated to know anything about your life that you wanted to share in gymnastics and he'd remember. And like, that's a rare gift that people remember and they show that genuine interest in others. And he did that in spades. So when Glen died, keeping his memory alive was like, man, it just has to happen. We got to keep him at the table. So his foundation was the first way to do it. The movie 13 Hours came out and that, we weren't involved in that. That was Michael Bay and his whole world. But that's what most people identify with Benghazi. And obviously Glen Bub was a shorter lived character in that part of that particular narrative. He had his own adventure from getting from Tripoli down to Benghazi. But his legacy was super important. So, the foundation was phenomenal. The Glen Hero workout was really special.
Can you go through the workout for us? We have it here, but I want to hear it from your perspective.
Well, I want to be clear. It's not the workout that I wanted.
Okay.
I wanted a workout that was a lot easier than what Tony Budding and his team put together. But then I really learned a lot about a hero workout through going through that process. So there's actually an application in CrossFit that you fill out to get someone anointed a hero workout. And Rory McKernan helped me go through that process. He really helped spearhead it. And it was like, talks to us about Glen, who he was. And there's like a little paragraph and you write that out. And I did it with my buddy, Danny Miller, who we'd gone through SEAL Fit together. We'd gone through all these big experiences together. And we were like, Glen loved pull-ups. Yeah, pull-ups. Glen loved running. Yeah. Glen did push-ups every single day. This guy was a walking barrel chest. Glen loved clean and jerks and ground to overheads. And we just like, and rowing. Like we've laid out all the things that Glen loved to do. And they came back with this workout. And I looked at it and I'm like, 30 clean and jerks to start? Like, I mean, yeah, he liked clean and jerks, but he wasn't married to them. Jesus. And then a 1 mile run was the only thing I agreed with. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Glen would run a mile. He wouldn't just run like 400 meters. He'd run a whole mile. And then I'm like, rope climbs. Like, he didn't do a rope climb. Like, he didn't care about climbing ropes. 10 of them at 15 feet. And then you got to run another mile. All right. And then burpees at the end. I'm like, Glen didn't do burpees. Like, he hated burpees. I was like, I was so mad. I was genuinely mad about this workout. And then I just stopped and thought about it. I'm like, wait a minute. This is like the most evil, hard expression of everything I actually put down on paper. Tony Budding, who was in charge of that, and whomever was anointing this workout, they did the ultimate Glen tribute. Like a clean and jerk 30 reps worth is just a mental slog. Mental, it's doing grace. Wow, that's a total sealish thing to do. Run a mile. Yeah, man, that's just a dick dragger when you're in CrossFit. A rope climb's like the hardest pull-up. You want to look at it that way. Like, that's how I end up looking. I'm like, yeah, that's basically the shittiest pull-up you ever got to do is a rope climb. So, touche. And then another mile run, but then the burpees, 100 burpees to close it out. And I'm like, yeah, I said Glen liked push-ups. Well, there's a push-up hidden inside the burpee. So touche, like they got it. It's an absolute, like, you see God in that workout if you're really pushing yourself, and it's awesome. I mean, I couldn't be more through. Like, Murph and Glen are the two that I do all the time, and I'm intimately familiar with both at this point in my life.
Well, it's an awesome workout. I have not had a chance to do it yet. Jordan has. We were talking about it beforehand, and I have a tendency to do stupid things workout-wise, and I think it just is a case of many of us have that tendency. And I said it out loud, so it needs to happen now. And I'm going to do Glen and Murph on Memorial Day. So I'm going to do both of them throughout the day on Memorial Day this year.
Wow. Man,
I'm gonna
hats off on that one. That's a good one. I usually reserve my Glen workout for 9/11 as an anniversary tribute in those times. But
Jordan's gonna do it with me.
There you go. Jordan didn't know that till right now, but now it's been recorded. So
actually, the way it really worked was because I'm gonna be at his house on Memorial Day, and I said, "Hey, how about this year instead of doing Murph, we do Glen?" And he goes, "How about we do both?" And I go, well, okay, you start. I'm going to be on a plane. And when I get there, you can do the first one. By the time I get there, I'll do the second one with you.
There we go. I can never jet lag.
I can never convince Mike to do something like that, though.
I'm in like neutral diplomatic waters over here. So I'm going to stay fresh to be able to do any demoing that we need to do the following week.
Love it.
Smart moves. I hear that. That's a good way to kind of play the fence. You just kind of ride it down the middle there.
Yeah. So Dave calls me lazy. I always say I'm just practicing what we teach. We've got to, we don't want anybody to do. We don't want to do anything that somebody hasn't trained for. And I have a
much brighter than I am, Mike.
I have an aversion to running, but I actually like Murph. I've done Murph a handful of times and surprisingly enjoy Murph. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I wrote a little piece this morning because obviously, like, I don't know when this podcast will be released, but obviously we're talking about a couple themed subjects around Memorial Day, and I put pen to paper this morning before taking the kids off to school, and I was just like, I want to write a little something about this year. And I was like, that's when I was kind of like, oh wow, it's been 15 years of doing Murph, and I do it on Memorial Day every year. And what does it mean? And like, what's it all about? And I just started just putting those thoughts down about, hey, like it's an important day. It's the kickoff to summer. It's sales everywhere, which is super fun. It's getting together with friends and family and barbecuing. But it's also this other thing, this tribute to our freedom, this tribute to what we're allowed to do because of the sacrifices of others. And I didn't learn that till later in life. Like, I think I knew it, like, empirically, like you learn it in school, but I didn't really think about it until Glen, really brought it to my attention. And he's like, yeah, really think about what Memorial Day means. And
your kids, you brought up your kids when we were chatting, and they're getting to an age now where they can probably appreciate these things that you're talking about a little bit more. your son is an avid baseball player and getting a little bit more competitive when it comes to that. Is the experiences and Glen's legacy something that you pass along to them in terms of how you interact with them in their sports and their training and their approach to kind of their daily life as well? Not just about you writing these things down and appreciating for yourself, but as a parent, how do you go about kind of passing these things on to them as well?
It's neat. They kind of refer to Uncle Glen a lot. And there's a few friends of ours that were all friends with Glen that all got married and had kids. And so like, we know he's up in heaven laughing at us like, suckers, y'all got kids, you're running around chasing them. But being able to inspire, like, hey, this is something Glen would have done. Like, oh, like it just straightens him up a little bit. Or let's learn about Uncle Glen and what he stood for. We go to Mount Soledad, which is a big memorial area in San Diego every year on Memorial Day. The kids have done it since they were born. Like, we don't skip a year. It's just like doing Murph. I'll do Murph, get some work done. And that afternoon, we take the kids up to Mount Soledad and we go to Glen's plaque and we talk about him. Just a little bit, just a little conversation around who he was and the things that he stood for. And like, they've been getting little pieces more and more every year to where it's baked into like their existence. Like they've been hearing about Uncle Glen since they were born and they will continue to. And if they have moments where they're stumbling or falling, it's a very easy reach into my pocket to talk about what he stood for, because I do it all the time. When I'm having moments, like I definitely have to look in and say, like, what would Glen do? Like, WWGD, man. Sure. And you get a little bit of a lift in those moments and you get a little bit of a slog. And it's like, hey, Murph sucks, man. But when you're halfway through it and you're looking at the other side, you remember that there's people that sacrificed a lot more than you're sacrificing for in that particular moment. And it gives you that gear to just keep it going and get it done. And at the kids level, at 6 and 8 years old, it's mostly around behavior. It's mostly around making good choices and feeling good about those good choices. So yeah, it's absolutely an inspiration. And I'm grateful to have had him in my life to inspire me, to inspire others around. I mean, now, we have Bubs, we have this brand that is this way to share the great things that he stood for through a company. I mean, it's like, hey man, Glen stood for self-improvement. Like this guy was physically fit. He was mentally sharp. He challenged himself. He always leveled up to improve himself. Gets out of the Navy, goes and gets his college degree, gets his pilot's license, reads books voraciously, was curious, had a curious mind. He wanted to know more. What goes on out there in the world? What makes people tick? It was amazing. And physically challenging himself, working through injuries, like firing it up when he felt great, never settling down, just go, go, go. And it's inspirational. And to be able to share that with the kids is amazing. To share it with the brand and hopefully inspire others to live a healthy lifestyle. Sign me up, man. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I'm sure he's looking down now and just proud of all the ways that you're able to honor his life and his legacy. And I mean, bring it back to now Bubs itself as a brand, as a company. I mean, you talked about your background in so many different areas of fitness and professional sports and marketing. How did you end up thinking that what Bubs is today was the right way to be able to, honor his legacy, but also to think, hey, this is the area where we want to kind of put the name to the brand? Because, I mean, did you know anything about electrolytes, recovery, those things prior to starting the brand at all?
No, it's funny. I'll tell this one little story of the mason jars on our counter. So, the last 3 years Glen was alive, we were roommates, like two single guys running around Encinitas and, doing the fitness and adventures and all that stuff. And I just followed his lead. Like, I never had to be the one who was smart about our exercise routines. I just did what he said. So like, we get together in the afternoon and he'd be like, hey man, we're going to the gym today. We're going to lift heavy, eat that. And it'd be like a mason jar and have whey protein in it. Like, cool. And then, hey, we're going to go to CrossFit. We're going to get after this gnarly workout, eat that. And branch chain aminos or whatever. And I'm like, okay, shake that up. Hey, we're going for a run today. Drink those electrolytes. And it was whatever was in the mason jars. And the fourth mason jar was Metamucil. And he'd be like, hey man, you want to get your fiber in your diet. And I'll never forget Like, Glen's not around one day. I'm going to go do a workout. I grab the wrong jar, the Metamucil, and I take that as my pre-workout. Let you
Gotta
guys.
label
I
these
hope there were
things.
I hope there were thrusters and wall balls in that workout.
Oh, dude, it was just a mess. But no, like I learned about nutrition through the advice that he gave, but I never really looked too far into it. Well, after Glen died, I'm CrossFitting like crazy. I'm coaching at Seal Fit. I'm coaching with Mark Devine doing the Kokoro camps, and I had a baseline that Glen had taught me. And I ate healthy at that point. I was in my 40s, like I knew the land of diminishing returns. And by the time I turned 45, I was really feeling it. I was like, man, my back squats are not what they used to be. I got aches and pains. And my wife came home from a work segment she did. She's a journalist. She works for television station. And she's like, oh, I interviewed these people. I read this on this blog. I want you to start taking this. And it was a jar of collagen. It wasn't this collagen, but it was collagen. And I'm like, oh, like, what does this do? She's like, oh, it's going to be great for your joints. Like, you sound like wrinkled up newspaper when you walk up a flight of stairs. And I need to preserve you in your old age because we're having kids now. And there's a little bit of a running joke. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it. So I just put a scoop in my coffee every morning because it's heat tolerant, unflavored protein, and sip my coffee. And a couple weeks in, I'm like, man, my fingernails are growing like crazy. And I'm like, I never could tell if anything was really working on all that stuff I took with Glen, like carbs and electrolytes together for a big endurance ride. Like, I guess it worked because I never crashed, but like, does it really work? And the only thing I felt worked was like no explode because you're just getting so overloaded with caffeine that you're like losing your mind. But after a couple of weeks of collagen, I'm like, man, fingernails. Then I needed a haircut a couple of weeks later. I'm like, God, I just got a haircut. But it was really about the 2-month mark when everything set in. And I remember getting out of bed. I'd been taking the collagen. I worked through the whole tub and I got out of bed and I'm just like, oh man, nothing hurts. And we had to fly across country with our kid and like all the stuff. And there's always a lot of stuff when you got a kid. And we fly to Boston, like 5.5-hour flight. We get off the plane and I'm like, man, I feel really good. My wife's like, oh, that's nice, dear. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, I feel great. She's like, okay. I'm like, what's in this stuff? And I just dove in. I'm like, what's in collagen? Oh, it's ground up cowhide. Why is that important? Oh, collagen is the most abundant protein in the human body, but you stop making it when you're in your early mid-20s. So by supplementing with collagen, you take it exogenously, you're teaching your body endogenously to keep producing collagen. So you're basically like keeping your body triggering its own collagen supply. Well, what's in it? Oh, a bunch of amino acids. Those amino acids are like glycine. There's 4 grams of glycine per scoop that produces synovial fluid. Synovial fluid lubricates the joints. No wonder my knees don't hurt anymore. Like, it was just light bulb moments, and it's all ground up cowhide. One single ingredient. So I could get with that because I really like the idea of simple nutrition. Like, I don't like a lot of sciencey stuff. And the idea for Bubs was born because a guy who I was doing some work projects with is a buddy of mine named TJ Ferreira, big e-commerce guy early into the space. He sees the jar of collagen on my counter, asks me if I take it. I'm like, oh my God, it changed my life. This stuff's absolutely amazing. And he's like, well, let's start a company. I'm like, what? He's like, oh, this is a fast trending product on Amazon. It was 2017 at that point. And we kind of pause and we look at each other and we go, well, what would a company look like? Like, if we were to launch a company, what would it look like? And we both said at the exact same time, well, if we ever launched a company, we'd have to do something cool for charity. Like, both said at the exact same time, looking at each other. And I'm like, Jinx, you owe me a Pepsi. And I know the charity. It's got to be Glen's charity. And Glen's call sign in the Navy was Bub. And this is exactly the kind of product that Glen would have taken if he were alive. So we'll name the company Bubs Naturals as a tribute to Glen and his way of life. And it all happened in like a 5-minute conversation on my kitchen counter with my 1-year-old son crawling around on the ground. And then we're like, does this make sense? And I called Glen's mom and his sister, and I called 2 of Glen's former teammates in the SEALs. I'm like, what do you guys think? And everyone said the same thing to me. They're like, oh, Glen would kick your ass if you didn't do this. So I'm like, we got to do this. That was it, man. Bubs Naturals was born with the idea that we were going to give 10% of company profits to military charity, to Glen's foundation, and to others in his name. And every product we make will stand for self-improvement, whether it be the world's first USDA organic electrolyte that's NSF for sport certified, whether it's the best quality in collagen peptides that you can get, which we sought out to do, flavor, solubility, amino acid profile. I don't want to do it if it's not the best. We have a functional creamer now, which is like my daily ritual in coffee. It's coconut oil, healthy fats, broken into an MCT. So anyone who's heard of like the bulletproof coffee, you're drinking an oil slick and it tastes horrible. We found a way to match it with tapioca starch, which is just delicious. And you get all your healthy fats for mental focus, for energy for hours. And it's all built into your coffee ritual, which you guys know about because we've been lucky enough to provide some Bubs Brew organic coffee to the Power Monkey camps. And it's all part of the ecosystem. We joke that we just make products that I want to take, that we're selfishly making things that I want as an aging athlete to keep me in the game. But MCT works, collagen works, electrolytes work, coffee works, clean and natural, and everything third party vetted and tested for that integrity and the quality of what we stand for at Bubs.
And Sean, I have to be honest, when we brought your coffee on board, I'm quite the coffee snob, and I was very skeptical because we had some coffee that I had found that I really liked that we started to use it at camp. And I was like, oh, we just finally got in a routine where our coffee is really good and I like it. And thankfully, I liked your coffee, so that would have been a deal breaker for us. I would have complained and whined all week long up into the next camp and been like, I don't care about any of their stuff. The coffee tastes like garbage. We can't have it. And
I would be here.
Your coffee passed the test for what it matters, and I'm so thank you for that for not putting a crappy coffee bean in with all the other stuff that I actually do love that you have.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, the coffee line is actually, it's one of the ones I'm the most excited about because what we were able to do with coffee was I was able to go into coffee and tell a story about Glen's service. So if you actually look at the three different roasts that we have, one's from Ethiopia. It's called The Wanted because when Glen got out of the Navy, he had a short-lived stint on a TV show that was on ABC put out by the Ebersol brothers, hunting terrorists in Africa. So I did a single origin Ethiopian that was a tribute called The Wanted. And then Glen's most challenging deployment that he ever did was to Mexico. And it was like hunting terror or not, there's more bandito stuff down there. And it was just a pain in the ass because he's like, yeah, man, like it's so hard to tell the good guys from the bad guys. It's the most challenging deployment. So we have a single origin Chiapas region coffee from Mexico called the Challenger. And then Glen decided to get into the Navy. Like I said earlier, he went on a surf trip down to Central America, Costa Rica. So we did a Central American blend called the Origin. It's the origin of Glen's journey into the Navy. So it's neat to be able to like create a product roadmap that has these subtle nods to the qualities of what he stood for and just have some fun with it. Cause that's what he did. Like the guy had fun. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, I think for you it sounds even more fun or special because you have like a memory that's like a tactile ethos and like aura that you just put into everything, which talking to you now is actually really enjoyable for me. So I'm pretty excited for our community to be able to hear about you because we have all these things at camp and we're excited to share it and show with them. But when you get, the voice behind it and then the voice behind the voice, that's like a whole other level of depth where people can have another layer of enjoyment when they're actually using these products too.
Yeah, it's neat. I mean, you guys have a similar ethos with Power Monkey. I mean, it's origins. So in talking with Dave and learning about like the origins of the camp and like that inspiration and why you guys come back for more and it sells out and people want to be a part of that. Those are the groups we want to pair with. And I mean, there's no shortage of brands in the CrossFit space, and you kind of see them coming from a mile away, and they're like, "Oh, CrossFit's this hot thing," and they're going to sell into that space. And it's like, well, how many brands were born from within it? Or came from it. And, it's neat to be able to celebrate that culture and that space, especially with folks who are striving for more knowledge and to be better. So partnering with Power Monk is an absolute no-brainer.
Well, it's been such a great fit for us too. We appreciate it so much that you guys have been on board, and what we're trying to do is get you out to camp too. I know Nathan's been trying to kind of like put it into your agenda, put it in your calendar for fall, but we got to get you out there too. I think you'd have a great time.
Yeah, I definitely talked to him about that. We were together at another fitness event called Summer Strong last week, and he definitely got in my ear about it. And we did a little workshop on like, hey, what would that look like? And it's funny because I said to him, I'm like, man, I want to meet everyone that's in this camp. I want to dig in with like their why and why they're here. And I want to learn about that experience. Like, sure, I want to learn, my own skill sets while I'm there. I said, it's almost secondary to like, I want to see what this experience is all about. So, yeah,
you'll be coming in
on air
almost with like the inverse of what so many people come to our camp with. They come to learn a skill and then they leave and they're like, oh my God, I learned a lot about myself. I learned so much about all these other people. And like, now I have this whole new family that I'm a part of. So if you come in with that desire, then I'm really excited to see what you'll get out of it.
Nice. Yeah. Likewise. And I mean, Nathan just absolutely swears by the experiences and always comes back like, bucket's full every time, man. The bucket is full.
It's our favorite 2 weeks out of the year. We'll get you out there at some point.
Oh yeah.
But we're coming towards the end of our time here, and Sean, we really appreciate you enlightening us about your story and Bub's story, and we're excited to see where you guys are going to go next. But before we get you out of here, we got a couple of quick questions for you, if that's cool.
Well, you know what? I threw a couple your way the other day, so yeah, that's only fair.
This one, we always have on the agenda, and we have a running tally for it. So let's see what you got. What sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Gymnastics.
Yes. I guess as a snowboarder, you got a lot more aerial acrobatics.
Taking back some of those nice things I said.
Well, that's fair. Look at home, I have a kettlebell, I have 2 dumbbells and a pull-up bar. That's all I have in my house. And I'd be lying if I said, like, look at what's a go-to? Running, rowing, push-ups, pull-ups, squats, lunges, like it's body weight manipulation stuff. I don't get in the gym as much as I should to throw weight around. But I will say this, the minute I can actually get the hour in the gym, I am using equipment that I don't have in my home, and there's always a barbell involved. So I'm choosing gymnastics purely based on habit, not necessarily based on like my true passions. But like look at learning a muscle up's pretty cool. So is learning a snatch, like that you're unlocking stuff that most people just never think they're ever going to do. So
truth.
Cool.
Absolutely. Okay. Very diplomatic. Love the answer. 2, any guests you think would be great for us to have on the podcast? Someone that you interact with regularly or come across recently, somebody that would be a good interview.
Derek Price, former NFL player, Kokoro graduate, coach, Ironman finisher, and just all around amazingly inspirational individual.
Quite a bio.
Yeah, man. Like how many guys have played in the NFL, have a PhD, runs a physical therapy network out of Phoenix, Arizona, like coached at SEAL Fit, and he's just been just an absolute pillar to me in overall fitness. Not a traditional CrossFit guy. Like, yeah, CrossFit all the time, but like the dude who like introduced me to TRX and like how you can get medieval with a couple canvas straps, like just an awesome human.
Love it.
And he lives up to the name. So I'll put you in touch with Derek if you guys show some interest there.
Absolutely. That'd be fantastic. And last one for you. If you are a book reader, is there a book that you're reading right now that's worth passing along that you've read recently? And if not, a TV show or a movie that you'd recommend?
So I'm currently reading Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia. And I'm going to say like, it's the most boring book I have ever read, yet it's an absolute wake up call for general stuff, or it's a good gut check for being on a general healthy path. The inspiration there is don't die. But if I'm going to give you an absolutely phenomenal book, it's going to be anything by Michael Easter.
Anything?
All right. Well, he's only got 2 books, so it's kind of easy. So read them both. Michael Easter is a guy I've gotten to know through the Go Ruck family, hung out with him a handful of times, and he's just a really fun guy to be around. But I'm in the middle of Scarcity Brain right now, his second book, and it's phenomenal. You just got a lot of learnings there.
I know Jordan's read that one, right?
Jordan knows about Michael Easter.
I'm waiting to. I still need to read that one. I've read the first one. I read his first book, but I did just learn, and I'm only mentioning this because you said that Glenn was a Grateful Dead fan, that apparently Michael Easter is also a Grateful Dead fan. He was just at the Sphere to see the show in Las Vegas the other day. So just another
There you go.
And
high
Jordan
point
is
for him.
also a big Grateful Dead fan.
And I actually, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
I'm gonna just like in the absolute world of like small world crazy shit happening. So another friend of mine is a professional skier named Chris Benchetler. And Chris Benchetler somehow inked a deal to do a collaborative project with Dead & Co. And he's doing this like interactive media thing. So apparently at the show at the Sphere, some of his skiing was woven
cool.
into the show. Like it was part of the video presentation. He was up on stage with the guys, just like Easter was. I'm like, oh my God, two of my friends from totally different walks of life are hanging there with the Dead up on stage. Like it was some like Mickey Hart drum solo. And, you know, all of a sudden Chris Benchetler skiing down. I'm like, what the hell?
That's
so,
incredible.
So his books are amazing, but his original book that got everyone talking was The Comfort Crisis. And it came out kind of towards the tail end of the pandemic. And it was an absolute eye opener to the slovenly nature of our society and just how easy it is to be an absolute slug and how to challenge yourself because it's in your DNA. I just highly recommend it. If you had to choose between those two, you only got time for one book, read The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter.
That's we getting back out to camp too.
One book follow-up or parallel question, just because I just noticed it over your shoulder. Are you reading or have you read Traction? Is that what's behind you?
I was gifted Traction as a way to get into organizational, just operational efficiencies. I have not yet started it. Part of having a 6 and an 8-year-old and a wife that is a newscaster who gets up at 3 a.m. is your reading windows are really limited. And you can't have a light on. So I'm kind of like reading Outlive on a Kindle. And it's also like, it's a painfully long book to me. And I'm so exhausted by the time I start reading. I make it like 5 pages in and I'm just lights out. So Traction's on the list. It'll be next, but I'm toggling between Scarcity Brain and Outlive.
Got it.
Fantastic. Well, Sean, thank you so much for the time. People want to follow along with your journey, where you got coming up next, what Bubs got going on. Where can people follow along?
So Bubs Naturals at Bubs Naturals, BUBS NATURALS. Check out our website. It's a little bit of a deeper dive on our products, our story. My social media is easy, just at Slako, SLAKEO. And yeah, man, like we're out doing it, having some fun with it, and trying to spread the good word of living well and helping others at the same time.
Thanks so much, man. It was great chatting with you. Hopefully we get to meet up in person sometime soon. For all the listeners out there, please again follow along at PowerMonkeyFitness.com, at Dave Durante, at Mike Service, at Power Monkey Fitness. We got our next camp coming up at the end of September 22nd to September 28th. We'll be at the CrossFit Games, Mike and I teaching at Iron Horse. Follow along with some information about the sessions we'll be doing there. Until next time, thank you all for listening.